Jovan Buha! Buha!
Yo, yo, I'm Jovan Buha, NBA reporter for Buha's Block, and welcome to another live show. That was a stinker, an all-around stinker from the Lakers. They fell 129-99, their first blowout loss in a while. They dropped to 28-18. They remain number 5 in the West. They are just a half game up on Phoenix and Minnesota in the loss column, and now 2 games back of Houston in the loss column, though Houston is currently playing San Antonio as of this recording. LA drops to 3-2 on the road trip, and they had been playing with fire on this trip. They had, depending on the game, either a segment or a quarter or even a half where they were just outright terrible, and they had been able to overcome that in the second half in Denver, nearly overcame that against the Clippers over the final 18-19 minutes. They had a brain fart in the third quarter against Chicago, and then obviously an extended brain fart against Dallas from the third quarter into the fourth. But in 3 of those 4 games, they were able to either make a comeback or stave off the comeback attempt from their opponent. Tonight, they just got curb stomped in the third quarter. We're down 2 going into halftime, and then in the third quarter, an avalanche, as JJ said post-game, of threes and layups from Cleveland. They were slipping screens. They were back-cutting the Lakers and getting out in transition, winning all the 50-50 balls. I tweeted after the game that the difference tonight for the Lakers was threes, free throws, rebounds, and turnovers, which is almost every important facet of the game. Also assists, right? LA only had 21 assists tonight, and there was I forgot who mentioned it recently, but someone mentioned that when I think it might have been actually JJ, when they're above 25 assists, I think they only have a couple losses or a few losses on the season. When they're below that number, that's where most of their losses stem from in terms of the ball movement, the passing. Don't necessarily see that correlation offensively in terms of their offensive rating, but you do see it more so defensively. And tonight, the defense was atrocious. One of their worst defensive performances of the season. Certainly one of their worst defensive performances lately based on how they had been defending. But a 135.1 defensive rating for LA. Though the 103.7 offensive rating was not much better, if better at all. But before we get into it, shout out to the Late Night Gang. Shout out to the chat. Appreciate you guys tuning in especially after these blowout losses. I had not used the concerned YouTube thumbnail in a while because the Lakers have not been losing. They've been playing well and also have not had some bad losses lately. But this was a return to form for them from a floor perspective. That this was reminiscent of some of their earlier blowouts in the season. Let's just get into it. I don't want to dwell too much on this game. There were several things that went against the Lakers that I don't know how much we could apply moving forward. Like, certainly there are some trends that have been present in a lot of the Lakers' losses this season, especially their blowout losses. So certainly some of this was just the flaws and constraints with this group, with this roster. Just some of it is inherent to who this team is, but some of it was out of their control, like Luka Doncic taking a 3 on the left wing, taking a couple steps back and falling off of the court and twisting his ankle because Cleveland has not addressed this court issue, which we know Drew Smith in Miami that caused a serious knee injury for him. There have been several other guys who have had ankle injuries or leg injuries due to this court. It is clearly something that they have to address. And for the Lakers, I mean, we still don't really know the extent of Luka's injury and how, he was able to play through it, obviously, but like, if this is something he's going to have nagging him for the rest of the trip or for the foreseeable future. And if that's the case, like, it's just really unfortunate that this court is set up this way and that it impacted Luka the way that it did. Then you have LeBron also rolling his ankle later in the fourth, which the game was already over. The game was out of reach, and that did not, like, LeBron did not have a good game. So I'm not saying that impacted his performance necessarily. But of course, if it does linger and it did look like he was in some pain there on the bench, then that's another thing that the Lakers have to worry about. And just as Austin Reeves is getting set to make his return, they're potentially now dealing with a couple of new injuries to their other two best players. But with all that said, let's just get into the game, and then I will move on into the news of the day, which there was a lot. Buha's big picture, LA finally gets burnt. And I said it at the top, but I felt LA had been playing with fire to a degree in each of their games on this road trip so far, right? Like first half in Denver, they're down 14. Against the Clippers, they're down 26 midway through the third. Against Dallas, they're up by double figures. They give up a 16-0 run. They're eventually down by double figures with about 7 minutes left in that game. They have the big comeback in the fourth. Then Chicago, they are looking like they're going to blow them out. They give up a huge run. They're only up one. Chicago has multiple opportunities to take the lead, and then LA puts them away end of third, and that goes on to be a solid win. But LA, they just have these stretches where they really struggle on both ends of the floor. The offense stagnates, turns into a lot of iso ball, hero ball. Guys are doing more than they should be offensively. A lot of just unforced turnovers. I mean, how many times do the Lakers just on a drive, someone will dribble the ball off their foot or try to make a kick out pass, a skip pass that's easily intercepted and turns into a pick six. Tonight, especially, I thought the defense, though, was more of the problem area, where the communication on switches tonight, on and off the ball, was atrocious. The Lakers, I mean, several times guys were walking into open threes. Donovan Mitchell got into a groove in the third quarter, in part because there was a botched closeout on him. There was a botched switch on him. And you cannot do that, especially with a player of his caliber who had been held relatively in check up to that point in the game and then broke out in a major way in the third quarter. And that ultimately was a big difference in this game, was that third quarter shooting. I believe they hit 7 threes in the third quarter, 7 or 8. And I mean, up until garbage time, they had more threes in the third quarter than the Lakers had the entire game through the first 3.5 quarters of this game. But like the battling for 50-50 balls, like the Lakers just didn't have juice tonight. That was something that JJ touched on a few times post game. And I thought it really stood out. Like they were playing with, it looked like they were playing in mud out there. And this had not been something we had seen from this group recently, right? I think going through the Lakers schedule, the last time they looked like this for an extended period. I mean, again, they had some, like the Clippers game and the Denver game were rough for stretches, but there was a lot of shot making in those games that I felt like the Lakers' spirit and effort was better than it was tonight. The last time they had like this type of stinker, I mean, maybe you could go back to the Charlotte game, though there was also an element of shot making there on both ends. I mean, yeah, I guess the Charlotte game, but before that, it had been a while, probably going back to the Detroit game. So over the past like month, the Lakers haven't really had a lot of performances like this, but this certainly was reminiscent of some of the blowout losses they've had to good teams. And of note, I haven't even mentioned yet, the Lakers got some good news yesterday with Evan Mobley being ruled out. Evan Mobley is Cleveland's second best player, and he is the type of guy who could guard LeBron James on one possession, then switch on to Luka Doncic and hold his own relatively for a power forward. So, one of the best defenders in the league, certainly one of the best defensive forward / big men in the league. So them losing him and also being without Darius Garland, I mean, they were without 2 of their 3 best players. And I thought the Lakers had a really good shot to win this game. Like once I saw Mobley was out entering the game, I had picked before the road trip, I said I picked Cleveland to win this game. Once I saw Mobley was out, I actually thought the Lakers were going to win this game. And that's how this game started. LA was up 9 at one point. They were up 10 at one point and then let go of the rope midway through the second quarter. Cleveland regained the lead. And then from that point on, it became a blowout in the second half. But look, like teams are due for stinkers. You look across the league, whether it's OKC or Denver, Houston, Minnesota, whoever, like teams have stinkers. this happens for the Lakers, they are in a position right now where every game really matters just because of the nature of the West. They are chasing Houston and San Antonio and Denver and trying to see if they could get into that top four. But they also have Phoenix and Minnesota nipping at their heels. So it does really feel like every game has this certain magnitude to it that the East doesn't necessarily have, or that some of the teams, lower in the West don't necessarily. Like the play-in mix is basically settled, right? It's going to be whichever one of those top six drops, and then Golden State, Portland, and the Clippers. It seems like those are the 10 teams. So there's going to be some jostling in like the 8 to 10 range, and certainly some jostling in the 2 to 7 range. So each game really matters, though, for the Lakers, which is why this was a disappointing outcome. And again, so anytime you get blown out by 30, like, it's one thing to have an off night. When the Lakers have an off night, they really have an off night, and the game just spirals out of control. In terms of notable performers, it's going to be a short list. So Luka ends up getting hurt. He exits the game. I think that threw the Lakers' offense out of rhythm. It threw their rotations out of rhythm, despite clearly being hobbled and at times moving on one leg and not, I think, having the same mobility on offense, but also on defense. Luka still put up 29, 5 and 6. Only had 2 turnovers, 12 of 20 from the floor, 3 for 8. I think in general, I've been really happy with his shot pass decision making. I think he's done a really nice job of attacking the rim, getting downhill, balancing out with the 3-point shooting, balancing it out with the lob threats and the kick out passes. And I think he's just been in a really good groove overall. Unfortunate that he suffered the ankle tweak and that he had to leave, and that he was clearly not the same physically the rest of the way. Do wonder if that does not happen, if this game's at least closer. I don't think the Lakers win with how they collectively played, but maybe it's closer into, or maybe they even have a little bit of a lead going into halftime, and then Cleveland has a little bit more of a hole to dig out of rather than having a slight advantage going to the third. But again, I don't think Luka being healthy or healthier, because he's still been dealing with the groin stuff. Like, I don't think that changes the Lakers' fate, to be clear. I just think Luka was clearly compromised to some extent. I don't think was able to get downhill as much, though he still had some post-ups and some nice drives, but just was not himself on several of those. Then LeBron, I want to touch on LeBron with one of my takeaways, but clearly a rough night for him. 11 points on 3 for 10 shooting, just had 8 points and 3 for 8 shooting going into the fourth quarter. 6 turnovers, had 5 going to the fourth. And I'm just referencing that because this game was basically over going into the fourth. So he played a little bit. Luka didn't play in the fourth, but LeBron scored a little bit, but he also turned the ball over, and just a tough night for him. From a performance perspective, clearly that there was an emotional aspect to this that JJ spoke to after the game that we could all see based on his reaction to the video tribute that Cleveland gave him. But 3 rebounds, 5 assists, 6 turnovers, 1 steal. One of clearly, like, this was probably the closest he's looked to the first few games of his return, right? Where he had the rough first few games and people were, the sky was falling. People were crashing out about LeBron and how he looked and whether he could conjure the all-star, all-NBA version of himself that we saw last season. This was reminiscent of that. I don't think this is I don't even feel like I have to say it's not the new normal, but I know some people will think that, like, no, this is not who LeBron's going to be. He's been in this extended stretch here of about 5 games where he has not been as effective offensively as he was in the preceding stretch, but I'm not concerned. I think there's a lot going on with this game. And then the rest, I mean, I'll give a shout out to Gabe Vincent. 11 points, hit 3 threes. His third 3 got LA up by 9, 35-26. So he did most of his work early, hit a jumper, I want to say third quarter. Some nice offense from Gabe. Defensively, I think continues to be targeted and picked on. And I just really think, and I don't know how much of this has to do with the injuries that he's dealt with. He's obviously dealt with multiple lower extremity injuries over the last few years, but it just feels like he's giving up drives way too frequently. And that used to be at least an area like he would still get targeted by bigger players in the post, or they could body him off the dribble. But it just feels like he's been a bit of a turnstile defensively in terms of guys are just line driving past him far more frequently than I think earlier in the season, and far more frequently than in the last couple of seasons. So I don't really know what's happened there, but I guess he gave a nice little like potential audition, I guess, for the trade market. I'm not sure, but 11 points, 4 for 6 shooting, hit 3 threes. Then Marcus and Jake combined for 8 points on 3 for 12 shooting. They did not have it tonight offensively, and I thought Marcus had some good possessions, especially in the first half against Donovan Mitchell. Jake did as well. Vando did as well. They kept Mitchell in check in the first half. I think he only had 9 points, but then he broke free in the third quarter and completely flipped the game. I like the spirit more so in the first half than the second half. He played better. I still don't think he had a good game. Like, he went from being like actively bad to still subpar, but like not actively bad. 10 points, 4 rebounds, had a couple offensive rebounds, had a block, had some nice contests. He played better, and I thought the vibe and the energy and the spirit with him was better. But like, would you have to make that argument? It's a pretty low bar of just like, we still need more. We still need to see more from him. Jared Allen thoroughly outplayed him tonight, and that has been a troubling trend lately overall. Rui had a really rough performance. 0 points, 0 for 7 shooting, 0 for 2 on threes. Did have a block. Did have some nice defensive possessions, and that's been something that overall has been better with Rui lately. But the shooting regression that he had against Chicago completely went away tonight, and looked more so like the Rui right when he got back from injuries. Like, had a tough turnover, just dribbling. Like, LeBron had a couple of those as well, but Rui had one where he just dribbled the ball and lost it. Had a kick out from Luka for a 3 that sailed over the rim, hit the side of the back, or past the rim, hit the backboard. Just some tough shooting from Rui tonight. Vando, I thought, had some really good moments. He connected on a couple lobs and had a steal. He had the nice lob finish into a steal that then led to another lob finish for LA that I believe Jake hit Jackson for a dunk, but continues to get a bunch of offensive rebounds and miss point blank layups. He was 2 for 7, 0 for 2 on threes. So he was 2 for 5 on twos. I believe all 3 of those misses were point blank layups. Maybe one of them was contested, but a couple of them were not. And that continues to be an area that he struggles in. Like, I will give him credit though, because he was not connecting on the lobs earlier. So that's been something that he's done better recently, but it does feel like almost like a game of whack-a-mole with Vando's offensive game, where it's like he'll be hitting the threes, but then he can't make a 2 to save his life. Then he's finishing around the basket, but then he's missing his threes again. Now it's sort of been, okay, he's connecting on lobs, but he's missing layups and he's missing threes. It's like he's not been able to put it together offensively, and that's just who he is. That's just part of his game, and it's, I think, a limiting factor that the Lakers have to try to navigate. Drew Timme, I liked his minutes in garbage time, but was not a rotation guy tonight. And then Jackson, I thought Jackson was fine. Jackson was basically Jackson in his 18 minutes. In terms of stat of the night, I'm going to go with 33.3%, which was Cleveland's offensive rebound percentage. That's a monster offensive rebound percentage. They had 14 offensive rebounds, and that kept them in this game and ultimately was what allowed them to finally break through in the second half, because for most of the first half, Cleveland was shooting under 40%. They ended the first half at 43%. But like, they were just getting so many offensive rebounds and beating the Lakers to loose balls and 50-50 balls around the free throw line area, around the top of the arc. And I just thought LA did a real, like, LA had, I would say in the first half. In the second half, things went off the rails, but in the first half, they had a lot of good defensive possessions that were ultimately undone by them not boxing out and completing the possession. And this was something that we talked about going like way earlier in the season, when LA would go through some similar stretches of, in some of these big losses that they had, they would defend reasonably well, and it would be like 20 seconds of awesome defense. And then right when the shot goes up, guys are failing to put contact on a body, failing to identify where the potential crashers are, and just giving up offensive rebounds left and right. And I mean, it's also like some teams, like, okay, when you're playing Steven Adams, who we'll be touching on Steven Adams a little later due to the season-ending injury he suffered, you could have a player grab like 7 offensive rebounds just by himself. We've seen DA have some big offensive rebounding nights. Vando have some big offensive rebounding nights. But with Cleveland, I'm looking at it now, they had 9 players grab at least 1 offensive rebound. And Tomlin had 3 off the bench. Mitchell had a couple. Allen had a couple. Tyson had a couple. Like it wasn't just like 1 or 2 guys. It was a team-wide thing that even into garbage time, they were still grabbing offensive rebounds, still cashing in threes against the Lakers defense. So like that was what killed the Lakers tonight more so was I think the inability to corral defensive rebounds and then also that leading to a bunch of open threes, which we know the Lakers struggle to close out at the 3-point line. Then 3 takeaways before we get into the Q&A. Takeaway number 1 is LeBron's emotional return. So the final 3 takeaways here are all going to be news dominated. There was a lot of news today across the NBA. This was like, I feel like things had been so boring and dull recently. And then all of a sudden there's this just storm of news today that just, it felt like every 30 minutes there was a new report, a new development of some kind. So LeBron's emotional return before the game, ESPN's Dave McMenamin reports that he has a report on LeBron in Cleveland, and there are multiple things to come out of that, including that the Cavs are open to LeBron returning this offseason if LeBron's contract will be expiring. And if he has interest in returning to Cleveland, Cleveland is open to it, according to McMenamin. And he also reported that in talking to people around LeBron, that LeBron doesn't necessarily want a retirement tour, because if there is the pressure of a retirement tour or the potential negativity, as Dave reported, like it could be LeBron's dealing with the sciatica and then he can't play in a certain game on the road. And then that's the final game in that arena. And all these fans bought tickets and they expected LeBron to play. And then unfortunately he can't play. He doesn't want to let people down. And so he doesn't necessarily want that spectacle of the retirement tour. So I think that flies, I would say, counterintuitive to what a lot of people have assumed, which is we saw the retirement tour that Kobe got. LeBron is in that same stratosphere of player, and I would say like post Jordan, it really is LeBron and Kobe as like the 2 biggest forces, the 2 biggest faces of the NBA. So seeing the type of tour that Kobe got, you would assume LeBron would want something similar. And we've already had situations where like he breaks a scoring record, they stop the game, and like for different things he's done, they have had a retirement tour element or a sort of spectacle nature to it, where the NBA will step in and give him his flowers. So it felt natural that whenever LeBron decides to hang it up, that we would get that notice and he would be celebrated in his final season. But it seems that, at least again, according to ESPN, that is not necessarily the case, which does raise the potential flag of, is LeBron considering retirement? And I don't have the answer. I don't know if LeBron has the answer, but that is just something that was percolating on my mind going into this game. Then you see LeBron tearing up when they give him the video tribute. And I believe it was the 8th time he's been back to Cleveland, if I'm not mistaken, since leaving in 2018. So he's gotten the video tributes, he's gotten the love from the crowd, but this one hit different, and it did, like the conspiracy mind started to wonder, like, I didn't want to call myself Conspiracy Jovan, because that's trademarked for that's a Bill Simmons thing. I just started to wonder, like, if he's getting this emotional about this, does that mean he's potentially retiring, or is this his final game in Cleveland? Like, we don't know, right? So that got me wondering. And then JJ talked about after the game, like, clearly LeBron was dealing with the emotion of the moment and was not himself. And this to me was, again, probably his worst performance since we'd have to go back to the Toronto game where his streak, even that game, he had 11 assists. So that was better. I mean, the Phoenix game where he had 10 points, 0 rebounds, 3 assists, maybe the first game against Utah, but even that game he had 12 assists. It's like, this might've been his worst performance of the season, just straight up. And I don't know. It's hard to separate how much of that had to do with just some of this noise and what it actually means. And for what it's worth, saw Shams reported on ESPN, I don't know if it was on Inside the NBA or not, that people close to LeBron are telling him that they think LeBron has one more year left. So that could be, I mean, if that's the case, then obviously he's playing one more year and then he could potentially get that retirement tour next year. But feels like there's a lot of noise right now going on with LeBron and this whole situation and what's going to happen with his future. And we don't really have much insight or much clarity as to the direction he is trending. But I did think it was notable hearing if he does not necessarily want a retirement tour, then he could potentially retire at the end of the season, depending on how he's feeling. And based on his reaction tonight, it did feel like he was really sinking it, like letting the moment sink in a way that if you're playing another game in Cleveland, whether it's next year as a Laker or next year as a Cav or next year as a different opponent, it just feels like there's something different about this reaction, in my opinion. Then takeaway number 2 is incredible news dump today. Like, again, so much news happened. So we have to start with the Giannis stuff. It comes out from ESPN that Giannis is officially open to being traded, has let Milwaukee know that, and or that, that's the paraphrasing of it, and that it seems like this is trending toward Giannis getting traded ahead of the trade deadline or in the summer. From a Lakers perspective, because we've already talked through some of the teams over the last few months. I don't want to rehash that conversation. From a Lakers perspective, I will just reiterate the Lakers, I believe, have a much better shot of landing Giannis in the summer than they do right now. And the primary reason being the best they can offer is some really like the core assets that they would be offering Milwaukee are Austin Reeves and 1 first-round pick. And yes, you have to throw in additional salary. You could throw in Dalton. You could throw in Adu. You could throw in 4 pick swaps. You could throw in a second-round pick. Like, if we're talking blue chip, actual valuable assets that you could, if you're Milwaukee, like sell to your fan base as this is what we got back for Giannis, it's Austin in the first. And I just don't think that is enough, especially with the context that Austin is about to be an unrestricted free agent and he has no allegiance or loyalty to Milwaukee, and he could easily just leave this offseason. And really, I mean, other than Milwaukee potentially being able to offer him more or offer him the keys to the franchise and be like, hey, you're going to be our number 1 undisputed guy, I just don't really see why, like what would be appealing about that for Austin. Austin's a competitor. Austin wants to win. And I do think if he ends up leaving the Lakers, whether it's signing somewhere else or it's a sign and trade situation, I believe it will be for a competitive team that is at least a playoff team, if not a contending team. I don't think Austin wants to toil away in the lottery and put up big numbers. He wants to try to win a championship. So again, whether that's with the Lakers or another team, I believe he'd be pushing for a more competitive team. So there is a lot of risk on the Milwaukee side of you trade for Austin, you get 1 pick back, then Austin bolts in the offseason. Now you got 1 pick for Giannis. That's an absolute disaster if you're Milwaukee. Now in the offseason, you could potentially get the 2 Lakers picks, 2031, 2033. You could have the Lakers draft on your behalf for the 2026 pick, depending on where that is, either in the early 20s, early to mid 20s. And you could, if Austin is open to it, and if Austin wants to get the maximum amount of money, he could agree to a sign and trade and end up getting traded to Milwaukee. But that would be like him controlling the cards to a degree and him having to sign off on that. So I just think that there's also a path for LA, depending on how they could structure their cap situation. where you could potentially acquire Giannis into space and still send out some of the young players, some of the picks. I don't think the Lakers are going to have the best package available for Giannis. I mean, that's clear, right? Already you're starting to see some of the rumors out there in terms of what's actually available. I think Giannis would have to push to go to LA for them to really have a shot. But I do think whatever shot they have right now, I do believe it will be higher in the summer when they have more picks to offer, potentially a locked up Austin to offer if Austin's cool with that. And maybe just flexibility. I mean, Milwaukee's going to need some flexibility here. They have the Dame contract, stretched out, looming over them. They have the signed Miles Turner, which now it's like, do you trade him or what happens with him? There's a lot of questions there in the potential fallout of this, but maybe they are looking for some cap flexibility. Then a couple more things. Steven Adams is out for the rest of the season, which is a huge blow for Houston. They do have a lot of size. It is worth noting that, I mean, that's part of the reason why they added a Clint Capella. Now, Clint Capella and Steven Adams are nowhere near the same caliber of player. For what it's worth right now, as we are recording this, Houston is up 62-54 on San Antonio. The game is in Houston, and they're playing Clint Capella. They obviously have DFS coming off the bench. He's a small ball, big option. Still have Şengün. You could go, Jabari Smith has played some center for them. So they will likely have to go smaller, although their small is still pretty big. But that's a huge blow for them. I mean, Steven Adams, one of the best backup centers in the league, the best offensive rebounder in the league, was having a historic season on that front. So I wonder if I'm Houston, I'm not like, they already had the point guard need, and we'll see if they're able to fill that. I would turn my attention toward also trying to get a center. And I think there's someone to keep an eye out for in terms of, can they, I mean, some of the same guys the Lakers might be after. Nick Claxton might be a little too out of their price range, but are they going after Daniel Gafford, a Day'Ron Sharpe, someone like that? Because I think they're now a team that could really use an upgrade over Clint Capella, who at this point is basically on his last legs, and I don't think should be an every night like playoff rotation guy. But that's a big blow for Houston, and that does impact the Lakers in the context of Houston right now is a game up on the Lakers, 2 games up in the loss column, and I do think this makes them more vulnerable. If Houston does not address the center position, I would move the Lakers up above them. I currently have Houston above LA in terms of my contender rankings and like West contender rankings. But if they just lose Steven Adams and don't address that in any meaningful way, I do have more confidence in LA against Houston in a head-to-head matchup. And then final thing before we move on to takeaway number 3 is Dalton Knecht. A lot of buzz with Dalton Knecht. So there's been a couple of reports recently, I believe from the Steinline and from the LA Times, that the Lakers have been shopping Dalton Knecht and a second-round pick. I can confirm that. That has been something that has been floated out there. I don't think that has a lot, if any, value. And I think the Lakers are going to be, and already have been, in for a rude awakening in terms of the lack of interest of taking that on. But then Anthony Irwin reported that Dalton Knecht and his representatives went to the Lakers and asked for a trade, or at least presented the notion that they want to be moved, want to be traded, and he wants a new opportunity. I've had some pushback on that behind the scenes, but personally, I don't like going against people's reporting. That's not my nature. I know some people get into it and get very combative. I can just say that some people I've talked to have pushed back from the Lakers side in terms of what happened with that. But it does feel like, regardless of what's going on with Dalton and his positioning and all this, like the writing is on the wall, and whether it's this trade deadline, whether it's next summer, Dalton Knecht is not part of the Lakers' future, and the situation has just not worked out. I think for everyone's sake, it would have been better if the Mark Williams trade was just never rescinded. I think that would have given the Lakers a better long-term center, and it also would have given Dalton Knecht a much-needed fresh start in my opinion, specifically like a small market team with lower pressure, lower stakes, lower attention, lower spotlight. I think that's what he needs to rehab his mind frame right now, his mentality, and really just have like a clean start, a fresh start. So this seems to be trending toward him getting traded. But as for what, like, I think more realistically, it would be him packaged with Gabe Vincent or Maxi Kleber or all three in a bigger type move where LA's attaching a second, maybe a swap or something. But I think Dalton in a second, I don't think you're getting Keon Ellis for that. I don't think you're getting any player of consequence for that. So I think LA is going to probably have to throw him in to a bigger trade. And then takeaway number 3, DeAndre Hunter scouting report. And this was funny because DeAndre Hunter, so this leads me into another news dump from today, which was actually LA Times reported that Trey Murphy, Herb Jones, DeAndre Hunter, Keon Ellis, and Dante DiVincenzo and Najee Marshall, those are the 6 names, have all been linked to the Lakers according to league sources on the trade market. And let's just go through the list. Trey Murphy's not happening. The Lakers do not. It just came out from, I forgot who reported it, so apologies. But someone just reported that New Orleans is looking for a Desmond Bane level return for Trey Murphy and Herb Jones. Trey Murphy's much closer to Desmond Bane than Herb Jones is, but that is a ridiculous. The fact that they're floating out, they want 4 first-round picks or something along those lines. Trey Murphy's not happening. He's too good. The Lakers don't have enough unless they're putting Austin on the table, which they're not, and I just don't see happening. Trey Murphy's not happening. Herb Jones, I think, should be available for a first-round pick if the Lakers are putting that on the table, but it seems like New Orleans is overvaluing him to a degree, and at that point, it just seems unrealistic. Najee Marshall, I find interesting. I think it just depends on what you're giving up. I would not want to give up a first for Najee, but I would give up a second. But then from the Dallas perspective, do you want to trade with the Lakers, and do you want to not get like the most value possible or even a fair trade with the Lakers from a Dallas perspective, like with their fans and how they're going to feel about that? Could be a PR disaster again. Look, I've said this before, maybe some Dallas fans will like the Mavericks helping Luka and trying to help him win a championship. But in all seriousness, like if you're the average Dallas fan, I don't think you love them trading with the Lakers again and trying to help the Lakers and not recouping the maximum value. So Najee, I'm a little bit skeptical of. I also don't think he's quite the shooter the Lakers need from the 3-and-D perspective, but also not quite the defender either. I think he's a solid defender, but he's not like starting defender in the conference finals type defender. And I think LA could still use that type of guy. Dante DiVincenzo, I do not see happening. I don't see Minnesota and the Lakers trading together. I also don't see any world in which the Lakers get DiVincenzo without giving up the first. And I think they would try to not give up the first for DiVincenzo. Even then, if I'm Minnesota, why am I doing DiVincenzo for, let's just say, Rui in the first? That does not really make any sense from Minnesota's side. They need ball handling and playmaking, and DiVincenzo's not like great at that. But compared to Rui or Gabe Vincent or Maxi Kleber plus a first, like I'd much rather have DiVincenzo. This is a team that just made the conference finals back-to-back years. I don't see why they would be taking a step backward to get a future pick for DiVincenzo. I mean, you're basically like, if you replace DiVincenzo with Gabe Vincent, hypothetically, you're taking a big step back. Like there's a huge gap between those two guys. Then Keon Ellis and DeAndre Hunter, though, these are 2 guys that I think are much more realistic. Keon, it really comes down to the price and if Sacramento is going to hold strong in terms of demanding a first-round pick for him. If they lower that price, I think that Lakers can certainly get in the mix. And then DeAndre Hunter is interesting, though, again, with him, and this will transition into tonight's game, much better second half than first half for DeAndre Hunter. Finished with 19 points on 7 for 15 shooting, 3 for 8 on threes, 2 for 2 on free throws, 3 rebounds, 1 assist, 1 steal in only 21 minutes. Felt like he was out there a lot more. I like DeAndre Hunter, and I think there's some clear similarities with Rui in terms of like the general archetype. Now, Rui's a better shooter, and Rui's a better catch and shoot player, but DeAndre Hunter is a better and more mobile and versatile defender. And I would also say, as we saw tonight with some of his bag, is a more versatile offensive player in terms of he can do the Rui, like attack a closeout, hit a 1 to 2 dribble pull up, but he can also turn a drive into a post up and score that way. He could just straight up drive downhill. He's got more wiggle to his offensive game. So it's not like a strength of his necessarily, but he does have that in his bag that I think Rui is much more of a line drive type player in terms of he's either shooting it or he's driving it straight. Like he's not doing a crossover or spin move necessarily. He's a little bit more, I would say, mechanical with how he moves compared to a guy like Hunter. That said, even though I do think Hunter is a better player than Rui, and I think he would be an upgrade over Rui, I don't love the contract. It does feel like he is making a little bit too much money. This year he's making 23.3, next year 24.9. So I guess technically you can acquire him with some combination of Gabe and Maxey. But is Gabe and Maxey plus a second? Like I guess for Cleveland, you're getting off the money. I don't really want to pay DeAndre Hunter $25 million next year though. And if you're not giving up, I guess if it really is just like flipping Gabe Vincent and Maxey for him, I'm interested in it, but I don't want to give up the first. I don't think he's worth the first, and I don't love that salary next season. And again, I think in general, the reason I'm bringing up Rui and sort of making that comparison is like he's another guy who I don't think is the right fit defensively next to LeBron and Luka and Austin. I think he's a better fit, and I think he's a better defender, but he's still not quite at that level that when we're talking about an Ellis, a Jones, a DiVincenzo, even a Marshall to a degree, I think all those guys are multiple tiers above DeAndre Hunter as a defender. So I like DeAndre Hunter. I thought he played a big role, especially in that second half of the third quarter. After he had a really rough start to the game, I think he started 0 for 4, 0 for 5, something like that, and then got hot in the second half. But just not a big motor guy. Like again, comparatively to Rui, I think he's a little bit better in that regard. But I don't. If it's Gabe and Maxey in a second, sure. If it's Gabe, Maxey, and Dalton in a second, sure. But if it's Rui or if it's a first, I'm not really interested in getting DeAndre Hunter. And he's a name that keeps getting linked to the Lakers. Has been linked to the Lakers going back to the Atlanta days. I don't see it. I don't really get it, but that's my perspective on that. Before we get into the Q&A, I want to give a quick shout out to tonight's presenting sponsor, Fanatics Live. After this ad, I will be back in exactly 57 seconds. Shout out to Fanatics Live. Like many of you, I grew up collecting basketball cards and Pokemon cards. And so when I had the opportunity to partner with Fanatics Live and rip some cards live for you guys, I cannot think of a more fun and nostalgic activity. Fanatics Live is an awesome way to get in on the fun of ripping sports cards. It's an app where fans buy and rip cards together 24/7 with live on-screen hosts guiding the action. Let's go.
All right, Jovan. Show it to me. Come on.
Okay. Okay. Take another player from Dallas. There you go. First NBA rip, and I land a Cooper Flag card. New users can get a free instant rips pack with a graded card to try it out. Use the link in the description to download the app and join your first stream to get your pack. Thank you to Fanatics Live for sponsoring this video. Thank you again to Fanatics Live. All right, let's get into the Q&A here. First one from Connor Phillips. Shout out to Connor. A Giannis trade would be a disaster. The lack of depth, athleticism, and reliable role guys is still there with Giannis. Top-heavy rosters don't work. I agree. I think it really depends on how you structure the roster. I think it really depends on who you're giving up. Like, again, if there's a way to, let's just say there's a way to do it where it's like Austin, Vando, Gabe, and Maxey, you're really flipping only two rotation guys for one, and like you do need to replace the back end of the roster, and maybe that's converting Kobe Buffkin and Drew Timme as like the Gabe and Maxi Kleba replacements. But in general, I agree with you. I think that's also where I'm a little skeptical of a potential Luka, Giannis, Austin trio. I think that would be certainly the best trio in the NBA. I don't know that it would necessarily be close. You have two top four players plus Austin, who was a clear all-star before getting injured. But then the rest of your roster is just, you're almost have 75% of your cap tied up to three players, which just in 2026, it's really difficult to build a competent and competitive roster or rotation around three guys making that much money, especially when it's one thing if you also have like guys who are grandfathered in because of bird rights and maybe you drafted them, maybe you've had them for a while and you could go a certain amount into the cap, into the second apron, into the luxury tax. But with LA's situation, because they're going to have so many expiring contracts, so many guys potentially leaving in this case, it would get a little tricky there to build out the depth. So I'm with you. Like, I don't want to overthink this. And there are certainly ways where I think Giannis would make a ton of sense. And I would not reject a potential Giannis-Luka partnership. But to your point, I think there's a lot of context that goes into like, who are you trading and what does the rest of the roster look like? And it's just difficult right now to say what that would be. Even then, though, it does get the reason I keep saying the summer is far more likely is it's tough for LA to get to the salary to match Giannis. You got to get to 4, maybe even 5 players. And then you also have Milwaukee can't just take on 4 guys for one and add 3 players. Like then they're in a situation where they have to waive guys and then that's affecting their cap and whatnot. So like there's roster restrictions and rules here that have to be factored in as well. So maybe that's a 3-team trade. Maybe you expand the trade a little bit more and then Milwaukee's giving up a couple guys, but still it is pretty complicated to get it done before the trade deadline. I think the offseason is more likely, but overall, I don't see him going to LA. I think New York, Miami, to a lesser extent, Golden State, those would probably be my top 3 right now. But I get it. I get why fans want it, and it would be great if it happened. But there would certainly be some roster building challenges, and we've seen this front office struggle with putting the right pieces around star top heavy groups. Go back to the first year of LeBron, AD, Russ, and then really from that point on, the rest of the LeBron AD era. And then you could argue part of the Luka, LeBron, Austin era is not gone great in terms of the role player supporting cast. So you got to have also a lot of confidence and trust in the front office putting the right pieces together, which I think right now is kind of TBD. Katja, thank you for the super chat. Can we trade Ayton for Jakob Poeltl? Not straight up. Jakob Poeltl is, I believe, making around 20 million, 19 million. Looking at his contract right now. Oh, he's making more than I thought. So right now he's making 19.5. He's got one more year at 19.5. I forgot about his extension. His extension kicks in. He's making 27.3 in 2027-28. 29.5, 2028, 29, and 27.3 in 2029, 2030. No, thank you. I do not want that. That's a bad contract. I like Jakob Poeltl, and I don't think he's going to age poorly necessarily, but that contract is going to take him through age 34, which for a role-playing big man, that's a pretty old player. He's also someone who I'm looking at his recent. Yeah, I mean, he's dealt with some injuries. If you go back the last 3 years, 50 games, 57. Right now, he's played 21, which is less than half of Toronto's games. The first half of his career, he was much healthier. Even then, He's only had, he was a rookie in 2016. He's only played over 70 games in 3 seasons. So this is a guy who you could pretty much pencil in for 15 plus missed games every year. And I do not want to be paying that guy $30 million. I like Jakob Poeltl. I think he's underrated, but he was much better on the current contract. When you add in almost 10 extra million, that's a no from me. Now, the Lakers can't even do that. They would have to add in, I guess, something like, for right now, it would probably have to be Gabe and Ayton or Maxey and Ayton, something like that gets you close. But I would not want the extra. He's got 4 more years left, including 3 at 27 plus. That's a no. The Enigma, thank you for the super chat. Thoughts on rumored DK trade request? Is it real? I've not been able to confirm that it is real, and I've gotten some pushback behind the scenes. That doesn't mean it didn't happen. Sometimes these things leak and it gets a little messy, and then there's some retraction or some pushback on things. So I'm not going to get into the mud with that, right? That's not my style, but I can just say that I have heard some pushback on it behind the scenes, and that's all I feel comfortable saying. But whether it is real or not, I'm sure if you asked Dalton, you gave him truth serum, he would want to be out of LA. He is not in the rotation. He has not, he's certainly had opportunities, which I would argue he has not made the most of and has really failed to capitalize on those opportunities. But you could also argue he's not really been in a development situation to maximize him. And I think there are other teams and other situations where they would look at what Dalton showed in the first half of his rookie year and be like, we want to unlock that version of him. And also in general, I just think there's been sort of a dark cloud hanging over him since the Knicks trade. He did have some, I feel like people have treated it as if he was awful after that. And he did have some big games, right? He had that Denver game. He's had a couple of 20 plus point games where he's flashed what he can do. But for the most part, the shot has not been there. The confidence has not been there. The defense has not improved in a meaningful way. And the playmaking, the decision-making, remembering plays, there's just been a lot of drawbacks with him in his game. And that's before we even mention the fact that he's already in his mid-20s and is getting pretty close to being who he's going to be as a player. So I would not be surprised if he has not requested a trade, if in his head he has requested a trade, it really wants the Lakers to trade him, because it feels like this is headed toward him being gone again, whether it's ahead of the deadline or this summer. He's not a part of their future. Jay the Greatest, thank you for becoming a YouTube member. This is also a nice opportunity to say that I'm going to be changing some things with the memberships. I'm going to be adding some perks. I'm also going to be changing the pricing on the highest tier. So going to be making some changes that I think you guys will like with the memberships. For starting with the tier 2, I do want to start doing some members only lives and Q&As with you guys. And then tier 3 will be the more intimate hangouts where it's more off the record conversations. Eric, thank you for the super chat. 2 questions for you, Jovan. 1, who sits when Austin returns? 2, what do you think about the coaching/film crew structure? I'd love to know who are our defensive guys that influence JJ. Is there room to grow there? 1, I think it will be Jake LaRavia, who sits when Austin returns. I mean, it's clearly between those two. I think at this point, Rui has settled into a bench role. He has embraced that. Now, JJ has not outright said that that's going to be the case. So maybe JJ goes back on that and goes back to the original starting group that only played in, I believe, 8 games together. But I think it's going to be Jake LaRavia who moves to the bench. Marcus will, because I also think JJ has shown, for as much as JJ has adapted, I would even say more so recently, with some of the defensive schemes, with the trapping and blitzing more, with the zone looks, with changing up the rotation. In general, we know JJ is a bit stubborn. JJ has certain beliefs and viewpoints on things. And anytime JJ has been able to replace one of the starters or one of the four perimeter starters, it has always been Marcus. So when Rui would miss time, when LeBron would miss time, when Austin would miss time, when Luka's missed time, if there's one player going in there, it's always been Marcus. I don't think that has changed. I don't think there's really been any reason to change that. Jake LaRavia has had moments that have certainly been better than Marcus's moments, but I think he is pretty inconsistent offensively, and that's really the only thing holding him back from a permanent starting role. I also think Marcus is a more versatile defender who can scale. Like, I think the Lakers need someone who can guard guards and guard backcourt players, and Marcus is much better at that than Jake is. Marcus, I think, handles speed and athleticism better than Jake does. Marcus is not perfect in that regard, and certainly he can get cooked by smaller, quicker guys. We've seen guys cook him before the season, and that's just the nature of the Lakers defense and the limitations of this roster. But the lineup data has supported Marcus over Jake, and I believe Marcus will remain in the starting group and be the fifth starter. And for those who want to nitpick the positioning, offensively, he will be the 3. The positions offensively will be Luka 1, Austin 2, Marcus 3, LeBron 4, DA 5, and then defensively it'll be DA 5, LeBron 4, Marcus 1 through 3. Whoever's the best opposing ball handler / scorer on the perimeter, 1 through 3, Marcus will take that assignment. Luka will likely be the 3, I guess. Like, it'll probably be Marcus more so on 1s and 2s, but he can guard some 3s. Then Austin will be guarding the other backcourt player who's the lesser threat between the two. So that is just the nature of the Lakers starting group. And then in terms of the second one, Nate McMillan is the primary defensive coordinator, but it is a group effort, and Greg St. Jean, he's the primary offensive coordinator, but he's also a part of it. You also have Bob Byer, who is involved, Scott Brooks. Like, it is more of a collaborative group effort with a lot of the decisions. Of course, JJ is the final decision maker, and he's the one who is deciding what schemes they're running and what adjustments they're making. But Nate McMillan has been in charge of the defense for the most part. I do believe that some of the switching that the Lakers have done and some of the more aggressive schemes have come from JJ to my understanding. But like, going back to last season with the switching 1 through 5, with some of the unconventional looks that they went to, that's been a lot of JJ in the lab trying to figure it out. But he's also, they're working with the player development guys, they're working with the film guys, they're working with the analytics department, and it's really been a group effort, especially on the defensive end. So I know people think that they don't coach or practice defense, or it's not really an emphasis. It is an emphasis. It's just they're clearly limited with the personnel that they have. It's a below average defensive rotation. They do have some high highs, but it's often in small stretches. It's not sustained stretches. And we have a sample size of over half the season now of them being a bottom, 6 or 7, no pun intended, defense. And that just is the reality of the situation. But Nate McMillan has been the primary one. And I think some of the more conventional stuff with like the drop, I think that has been more from Nate. But yeah, I agree, room to grow there. And I think that's going to be, as Mark Walter makes his imprint, I think more so this offseason than anything, we will see the basketball operations continue to develop and grow out, and the coaching staff and the analytics staff and the player development and scouting and all that will be a big part of that. 7 Days Sports Pod. Thank you for the super chat. Jovan, Luka wants Hunter. Lakers must make a trade if Giannis goes to Golden State. Lakers will be a play-in for the next 4 years. Giannis will be gone 2-5. So February 5th, you're saying. Has that been reported that Luka wants DeAndre Hunter, or are you speculating that? I have not seen anything on that. But let's see. Well, I see something on Lakers being linked to DeAndre Hunter. I'm not seeing anything with Luka and DeAndre Hunter. But look, like if Giannis goes to Golden State, that's obviously not good for the Lakers, just from the perspective of having Giannis and Steph, I think would be quite the tandem. And that's like the one way maybe to save Golden State's season. But I don't think DeAndre Hunter is stopping. I just don't think. I'll say this. He was traded to Cleveland. Cleveland was looking for that fifth starter spot, similar to the Lakers, right? Because they had their four key guys with Allen and Mobley and Mitchell and Garland. They've been looking for the fifth guy who could be the 3-and-D guy, play off of Mitchell and Garland as driving kick guys, play off of Mobley in the post or at the elbows, play off of Allen as a roller and rim runner. DeAndre Hunter was supposed to be that guy, and he's just not been that guy for them. And he's been benched. He was moved to the bench. Similar, again, I have made the Rui analog, but moved to the bench because he did not fit with the other four players and what they needed from that spot. So if he's not fitting with that, they have a better foundation than the Lakers do defensively, because I'd rather have Mobley and Allen as my 4 and 5 defensively, at least, right? Like that's a much better starting point than the Lakers have right now with a 41-year-old LeBron and DeAndre Ayton. So it's like, I mean, now the flip side is I think Mitchell and Garland are worse than Luka and Austin defensively, if only because they're so small. And Garland's 6'1", 6'2", Mitchell's 6'3", 6'4". So you have two guys, let's just say 6'3" and under. That's a tough defensive backcourt compared to Austin 6'5", Luka 6'7", 6'8". Those guys at least have a certain level of size. And then in Luka's case, he's more of a forward defensively than anything. But point being, like, if DeAndre Hunter was not the solution for Cleveland, I don't think he's going to be the solution for LA. I like him. I think he's a good bench player. I don't think he's a starter on a serious team. And especially if you are relying on him to be the reason I keep making the Rui comparison is because I don't think he's like this defensive stopper that it's a misuse of him and his skill set. So if you're putting him in that position, I think you're setting him up to fail. And okay, similarly, I'll make you put him next to Jaden McDaniels and Rudy Gobert. Sure, he can hold his own as the worst front court defender. You put him in OKC next to their pieces, he's fine. When you put him next to the Lakers pieces and say, go be a stopper, I just don't think he could do that. Plus, you also have the inconsistency offensively, particularly as a shooter. So I'm, again, if it's Gabe in a second or Gabe Maxey in a second, I'm fine with that. Don't love the contract for next year. Does limit LA's flexibility. And I also just don't think he's the answer at the fifth starter spot. Like, if the Lakers traded for him, I would still advocate for Marcus Smart to start for what it's worth. Peter, thank you for the super chat. I know Denver won't do this, but I would trade Reeves for Peyton Watson and Zeke Naji. Nuggets can't pay Peyton Watson unless they trade Cam Johnson or Braun. Thoughts? I will respectfully disagree here. I think that, well, one, I'm not a Zeke Naji guy, and I thought he was pretty destructive against the Lakers in a negative way. I thought part of Denver blowing the lead and not being able to survive when they had Aaron Gordon off the floor was like the Zeke Naji minutes were really rough, in my opinion. He just has not put it together in Denver. That was a bad contract that they signed him to, and they've had a lot of hits with, or more progressive hits with some of their younger guys, including Watson, including Brown. Pickett has looked better. Like they've certainly had some hits identifying Spencer Jones. Like they've had some hits, but I think Zeke Naji is one of the misses. Now, I assume you're just doing this for financial reasons, but I would not want to trade for Zeke Naji just in general. In terms of Peyton, I think you could get. I don't think it's close in terms of Austin and Peyton Watson. If you're talking strictly like fit, I see where you're going with it, but you could sign Peyton Watson this summer, right? Like Denver's going to have a whole situation where they have to navigate, to your point, potentially losing Cam Johnson or Christian Brown to keep Peyton Watson. And maybe that ends up happening. Maybe you could strike and get a Cam Johnson or a Christian Brown as well. But there's a chance the Lakers could just outright sign Peyton Watson. So I would not want to give up Austin for that. And then just, I mean, if we're now opening the floodgates to give up Austin, like I'd much rather explore the Trey Murphy archetype, or like I think you need a certain level of offense, and Peyton Watson is showing those flashes and has become a much better offensive player than people thought he could be, and then frankly he had flashed up to this season, but there's still a pretty big gap there. And to be honest, like one of the biggest things we've seen now with Austin out has been the Lakers offense has fallen off a cliff, right? Like unless Luka is just going supernova and completely dominating, the Lakers have really struggled offensively without Austin. It's just because they don't have a lot of offensive firepower outside of him and consistent offensive firepower. It's basically Luka and LeBron and a mystery box, a mystery bag of you don't know what you're getting from DA. You don't know what you're getting from Rui. You don't know what you're getting from Gabe. You don't know what you're getting from Jake. You don't know what you're getting from Marcus. Like the Lakers need offense. And yes, Peyton Watson could step in and I think be more consistent than all the guys I just mentioned, but he's not Austin. And I think they would really miss Austin. So I think this would be selling low on Austin. And I think if you are going to entertain trading Austin, I think you should aim higher than Peyton Watson. That all said, I've reported this for like 4 years in a row. I will continue reporting it until it changes. If the Lakers are to trade Austin, they want to trade up. They want to package him with something to upgrade. So case in point, Giannis. That is a clear upgrade. Peyton Watson is objectively a downgrade. Whether you think he's a better fit, whether you think he's going to be eventually a better player than Austin, we could debate that. We could dissect that. Right now, Austin is a better player. He's a better value. And that, yeah. RGN Cal, thank you for the super chat. Free agency sucks if we take in bad players for picks. Luka out. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm not, I agree. I'm not there with like Luka out, but I think the Lakers free agency options are I think a little bit more dire than people are like letting on. I don't think it's a great free agency class. And I think a lot of the top guys are either going to re-sign or are restricted free agents, which means they are likely to have their contracts matched. And that is the strongest case for LA to make trades now to get guys, which is why I believe they should try to do that. But I don't think Luka's out this summer if that happens. But obviously, if they go multiple trade cycles and don't really upgrade the roster, or just go into next year with an incomplete roster, then you have to start wondering, like, how does Luka feel about that, and where does that go? But I don't think we're anywhere close to Luka asking out yet. Jay Spares, thank you for the super chat. Rocking Drake tonight. LBJ got me in the feels, bro. I'm sorry. I get it. It was a rough game, and LeBron had a rough performance. But you don't need to be sad to rock some Drake. That there's happy Drake. That there's all different types of Drake. You could rock Drake whatever, regardless of what mood you're in. But appreciate it. Appreciate the super chat, and appreciate the shout out. Kristen Lee, thank you for the super chat. Crane just posted a chart on offensive optimization for Luka and LeBron's past teams. Years LeBron won a ring, and Luka's 2024 Mavs had offensive optimization around 90%. LA's at 36% now. Is this a coaching or roster issue? I think it's both. I think it is both. I lean more roster, to be honest, but certainly you can point to the coaching and the inconsistent nature to the play calling, or the emphasis on, and again, the Lakers track this differently than Crane just does. So their version of, I think there's a difference there between like what they would consider freelance offense versus what Crangus would consider freelance offense. But clearly, I mean, I love Crangus's work. I've had him on the show many times. You might think it's between him and Kobe as my most frequent guest. I'm constantly referencing his stuff. So I think, err on the side more of Crangus and the way that he's tracking this stuff. And he also works with NBA teams and does this tracking for them. yeah, I mean, it's a concern. And I think a big part of it is that I think the Lakers have three guys who are so special with the ball in their hands that there can be I don't want to say like your turn, my turn element to it, but I do think there is an element of like, okay, we're going to run a Luka pick and roll, then we're going to run a LeBron post up, then we're going to run a Austin pick and roll. And it just can get into a little bit too much. Let's like run a specific basic action that's more like a pet action for each star to get the star comfortable, to make sure the star's involved, to make sure guys aren't going too long without getting touches. And it can sometimes just devolve into ISO stagnation and predictable basketball. And I think when the Lakers are at their best, it's when they're mixing it up, right? And you have Luka coming off ball actions, or you have their horns sets, or different flare actions, or stack actions. Like, I just think that they need to involve more players than simply posting a guy up in, on the block or at the elbow, running a basic pick and roll. Like, I think they need a little bit more variety, and they need to do it more consistently for sure. So I do put part of that on the coaching staff. At the same time, I think if we look at the roster outside of the big three, it's not the best collection of like basketball IQ offensively. And I think like there's some good passing, right? I think Marcus is a good passer. I think Jake is a good passer. I even think Vando, Jackson, and DA are all probably better passers than their reputation suggests. So like the passing and the ball movement can be there from this group. And when they're at their best, we see it in transition. We see it with the ping. We see it guys back cutting for lobs, or just cuts along the baseline. Like, there can be those elements with the passing and the ball movement, but it just doesn't happen enough and consistently enough. And you'll have a game like Chicago where I really liked a lot of the offensive stuff. And then you have a game like tonight where they can't even crack 100 points. And there's just so much inconsistency night to night with this group, which I think can be frustrating. But I do put a lot of it on the roster, to be completely honest, because they just don't, I think, have a lot of pieces offensively that complement what the three stars need. And because you do need a little bit of like the guys that thrive in the chaos, and like Rui can have some of those elements at times. I think Jake and Marcus, when they're playing well offensively, can have some of that. But like in general, I just don't think they have a lot of good offensive pieces outside their stars. Like, one thing to bring up Kranjis, and I've been meaning to reference this. He had a crazy tweet with a chart about how on B-ball index, they ranked, they like sorted the rosters 1 through 10, based on the rotation. And it was the offensive, the new B-ball index metric. I'm blanking on it, but basically, like, it's not offensive efficiency, but something along those lines of like offensive whatever. And the Lakers ranked in the top 2 at each of the 3 spots on the rotation. I think they had LeBron 3rd. Austin, I don't remember the order with Austin and LeBron, but it was like, I think Luka was 1 or 2 as a number 1 guy. Whoever was number 2 between Austin, I think it was Austin, he was like number 1 or number 2. LeBron was number 1 or number 2 as a number 3. Then spots 4 through 10 in the rotation of this metric, ranked across every roster, the Lakers were between 25th and 30th at spots 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So basically what that's saying is if we're ranking, according to these metrics, like if you're ranking the Lakers roster at each spot against every other roster in the league, yeah, the big 3, their top 2 play, like best, or top 2 number 1 option, top 2 number 2 option, top 2 number 3 option. You get to spot 4 and it's bottom 5 at spots 4 through 10 offensively. And like, that's a concern. And I think that has been borne out here with some of the results we've seen. Next one from Peter. Thank you for the super chat. go to 20 games a year between Intuit and crypto, I see only 3 contenders, OKC, Denver, and Detroit. Unless Lakers get Trey Murphy, it's not happening. Contender is, it depends how you want to define contender. I think if we're talking about like the inner circle, for me, it's actually just OKC and Denver. I think if Denver was, and look, you can always play the what if game to a degree. I think if Denver had not been without 3 to 4 starters for most of the past month plus, I think they'd be honestly right there with OKC for best record in the NBA. And that would be more of a discussion of like those two are on a collision course, which I already believe those two are on a collision course, especially if Denver could stay in the 2 or 3 side of the bracket, and OKC will likely be number 1. So for me, I think OKC and Denver are on their own tier. Detroit deserves a nod because of their record, and they've obviously been great. I think my thing with Detroit, they're just unproven, and it's tough to see a team like they had a really competitive first round series against New York last year. To me, they feel like a team that probably makes the semifinals or conference finals, runs up against the inevitable like wall for a young team that hasn't broken through yet. And then like maybe next year would be the year they make the finals or potentially win a championship. But I could be wrong on that, right? But I think if Boston gets Tatum back, New York is still there. I think either one of those 2 teams could certainly beat Detroit, right? Like I'm not saying I would pick them over Detroit, but if you told me New York beat Detroit, I would not be surprised at all. In fact, I might even favor New York if they can get their act together. And then Boston with Tatum is a bit of a wild card here, right? We don't really know what they're going to be, but those would be my like, I would put Detroit and New York on like tier 2 contenders, if only because someone has to make the finals in the East. And then in the West, I might only have San Antonio on that next tier. Minnesota, Houston, and the Lakers are in between tier 2 and 3 for me. But certainly for like, if you're saying like over 10% chance to win the title, I would only say OKC and Denver, in my opinion, right now. And then Detroit, New York, and San Antonio are probably my next 3 teams. But 2 of those teams, because they're in the East, one of those teams, I do think San Antonio is. I mean, I think they're going to have their own Detroit situation where they probably lose in round 2 or 3 just because of the lack of experience together, but we'll see. Kane Carter, just for some perspective here, I'm going to go about 10 to 15 more minutes, probably go around an hour 30. Kane Carter, hey, Jovan, why are there so many talks about LA waiting? I don't want to sound like a casual, but if you have Luka, Braun, and Austin on your team every year, you should be all in. Cap space is overrated. I agree with you. If you got for those who've been, the show's coming up almost on 2-year anniversary. If you guys have been listening to me, I'm pretty much always all in. I get it to a degree. I think you have to have some semblance of a standard in terms of, I'm not saying trade a first round pick for Keon Ellis, right? Like I think that's an example of a trade where that's just a little bit too rich for my blood. And like, yes, can you trade for Keon Ellis? He makes you better. He fits long term. Yes, I just don't really think he's worth a first round pick. So I do have my limits in terms of how all in I think the Lakers should go. But in general, I think they have been far too cautious and risk averse, and also like kicking the can down the road and selling some fantasies that I don't really think exist and have not quite materialized. Like it's tough to say that when they trade for Luka Doncic, right? And that's the ultimate counterpoint to like anything you say about the Lakers front office or whatever. But at some point we also have to factor in like that was not, the Lakers weren't, when the Lakers did the DFS trade late December and were trying to get that 3-and-D player and get a bit of a spark, they had not even started talks with the Luka trade yet. So like some of this was like, it happened very quickly and it did change a lot of their plans, but their plan was to add DFS and then maybe add another player right before the deadline. It was not flip AD and Max Christie for Luka and remake the franchise's entire trajectory. So point being, in general, they have been very much, well, we're going to have more picks in the future, more flexibility in the future, optionality. It's just like, if you look at the last couple of years, putting the Luka trade aside, which is a giant aside, like, okay, the DFS trade was nice. They got some values with DA and Jake and Marcus, but those are singles and doubles. And this is a franchise that wants triples and home runs and grand slams. And they got the grand slam with Luka, but part of the grand slam with Luka was also contingent on like building the right roster around him. And they just have not done that yet. So I'm with you. Now, part of this, of course, is like LeBron and his future and where things stand. And they will have more flexibility when he's off the books, at least at that number. And maybe he's back on a lower number. We'll see. But then Austin's going to be back on a higher number, right? So there's a bit of a seesaw there in terms of the potential salaries. But yeah, I think they should be trying to improve the roster. And at a minimum, I think they should be trying to, I think a realistic goal for LA should be adding a permanent starter at this deadline. And a guy who fits next to Luka specifically, but also if you really want to build around Luka and Austin, a guy who fits next to Luka and Austin. If you get that, whether that's Nick Claxton, Herb Jones, whoever, maybe it's a player not on our radar at all, because that's how the Lakers move, right? Like they're always moving in silence. That's the type of guy you need to add. If you add that, great. Even if you don't win the championship, you lose in the first round, at least you have that piece next year and you could build around that and have more of an infrastructure. Right now, it's like outside of Luka and Austin, I have no confidence in terms of like who's going to be on the roster next year, who can start, who actually fits. Like there's just a lot of questions right now. And I think they need to go out and find some answers on the trade market. Peyton Watson in the chat here says that Lakers are heavily interested in Peyton Watson. They are. It's just, why would Denver trade the Lakers Peyton Watson? That does not make any sense. And I know Jason had floated the Cam Johnson trade. I just, like, you rarely see teams trade with one another that are like rivals is maybe a strong word, although the NBA has dubbed the Lakers and Nuggets rivals, but there certainly has not been a lot of love lost between those two teams over the last few years. And I don't see Denver, again, I think they're the second best team in the NBA. I don't see why they would like actively worsen their odds of winning a championship and help out the Lakers. Like that just does not make any logical sense to me, but could be wrong. Look, if the Lakers trade for Peyton Watson, then I think the more realistic path is them signing him this offseason, offering him a lot of money, and then Denver either trading one of their players to make room to keep him or just letting him walk. Like that's to me far more realistic. Ronald McPaul says, what Buha is trying to say, guys, is that the Lakers should tank for this year's draft. Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. I think the Lakers should tank. Ken Carter says, Jovan, out of all your years of sports coverage, what teams and eras do you feel deserve a documentary that which you feel you can be a part of? I covered the beginning or, part of the Lob City era. And I know they did the FX not documentary, but like the scripted series with Lawrence Fishburne as Doc. But I mean, that team was clearly just a lot going on there. And JJ was obviously a part of that team, but you just had so much going on with the Blake, Chris Paul dynamic and then the Sterling situation. And that one, I think, kind of deserve, like, just so many characters from that era have gone on. Like, you think about Chris and Blake and Doc and DeAndre and JJ and Matt Barnes and even like random characters like a Big Baby or something like that. Like there's a lot of Austin Rivers. There's a lot of personalities in that mix that have continued to be like NBA media people or just sort of in the NBA ecosystem that I think like a future documentary on the truth behind the scenes with some of those teams and the collapses they had and just the infighting. I think that would be interesting. Like a lot of those guys don't talk to each other still, or there's a lot of like rifts in that team. That would be interesting. And then I think naturally, like when I switched over to covering the Lakers, I mean, we have to do the Russ era, right? Like the Russ, I mean, there has to be a documentary on the Russell Westbrook trade in that era in LA. And I was a part of a lot of the reporting during that era. And, I think I would have a lot to say and share about that. Then I think the Luka era is also going to be its own documentary at some point. And, I was there in New York when the trade happened, and I was in the locker room minutes before the trade happened. So I think that would be another thing. So I think certainly, like I've been fortunate. I was also covering the Clippers right when they got Kawhi, and I covered that for a season before switching to Lakers. So I mean, you could ask me about aspiration and the trees, and so I've been fortunate enough covering LA basketball the last 13 years. I think I got a few documentaries in me. Connor Phillips, what are the odds that AR's contract discussion gets messy this summer? I think very low. I think the Lakers are gonna make him a max offer, and depending, the order of operations will be, so Austin will have to wait a little bit for LA to make some moves in terms of signing guys or making trades at the beginning of free agency, just because he'll be on his cap hold, which is about half of his salary that would be at the max. It's around 20-ish million, maybe a little bit higher. So I think they're going to make him the pitch, similar to them making the extension pitch. But if they can present hey, if you take a little bit of a haircut here, take 40 million instead of 42, take 38 million, 37 million. I don't really see it going lower than that, of like a $4 to $5 million pay cut. I think that's on the high side. Maybe a couple million, whatever. We can sign player X. We can trade for player X. We have the flexibility to do X. If that is presented to him, then I think he would be open to that. If they try to get cute and say, hey, we're going to offer you 30 million, 35 million, there's going to be max contract offers out there for him. So I think it would have to more so be the max is on the table, but we would prefer if you did this. And if you do this, we can go do X, Y, Z to improve the roster. If that is present, because there always has to be, like, remember going back a couple years ago when LeBron re-signed, he was willing to take a pay cut for the Klay Thompson, the Jonas Valanciunas, the James Harden, the DeMar DeRozan. I had a chuckle with that because I was like, okay, well, James Harden and DeMar DeRozan are not signing for what the Lakers have. Valanciunas just straight up denied them and decided to go to Washington. And then Klay actually ended up turning down similar money, or depending on what you like, there's different reports out there, potentially more money from the Lakers, although with taxes, maybe that's less compared to Texas, to go to Dallas, right? So LeBron had his list of players he would take the pay cut for. They weren't able to land them. LeBron didn't take the pay cut. Like, I do think you need to sell a player on a pay cut. It's not just because ultimately, right? Like right now, for example, the Lakers are, remember, like kind of like 1.1 or so million under the first apron. Would it be nice to have like a couple extra $1 million of flexibility? Yes. Is that really making a difference in the roster? Like maybe they could have signed a 15th player. They're not really making a difference. Like whether they're 5 million under the first apron or 1 million, there is a difference. I'm not saying there's not, but it's not really a big difference. And it only comes into play if there's like a free agent you need, or if there's a trade and you need a little bit more flexibility. But that has not presented itself as of right now. So just point being, I think selling Austin on taking a pay cut just to take a pay cut will not happen and will not really make sense. But I do think if they present him with an actual option that makes sense, he would be willing to take less than the max. Kenny, hey, Jovan, would you do Rui and a first for Herb? And would the Pelicans entertain that? Hard to imagine teams offering more than 2 firsts for Herb, but for Murphy, probably. I think they can get 2 firsts for Murphy. I think they could probably get 2 firsts and a good player for Murphy. I think Murphy looks like a future all-star, depending on the situation, right? Like, I don't know if it's going to happen in New Orleans because New Orleans is just a bit of a dumpster fire. But if you put Trey Murphy on San Antonio or Houston or Minnesota or some of these other teams in the West that are more, Phoenix. Like Trey Murphy would put up some big numbers. I think get his recognition as an all-star caliber player. So I get the picks for Murphy. 4 picks is crazy. No for 4 picks. 2 to maybe even 3 picks, depending on the quality of the picks. I can understand that. I think Trey Murphy is really, really good. For Herb, yes, I would do this. And I've actually, so a few of you have referenced it. Last year I did top 10 trade targets and did a breakdown for each of the players that I ranked and talked through strengths and weaknesses. And I'm starting that list up again. The plan right now is to do that Monday. I will be in New York. I'm traveling to New York tomorrow for the games over the weekend and to next week with New York and Brooklyn. But the plan right now is to do that on Monday and do my breakdown of my top 10 guys. And I've been watching a lot of film. And I will say with Herb, I know some of the numbers have been down this year, but I also think that when we you could say the same thing about PJ Washington before Dallas acquired PJ Washington. And sometimes I think a player on a losing team having their numbers down, especially a player who, even a couple of years ago, was in that all defense first or second team conversation. And even last year was in the all defense second team conversation. Like, I know he has not quite been to that level this year, but I think you have to look at how dysfunctional New Orleans has been, and just like that has not been an incubator for like players have done better leaving New Orleans than being in New Orleans. I think that will be the case with Herb Jones, whether it's the Lakers or someone else, whoever swoops him over the next 12 to 18 months. I think he's going to look much different in a winning environment. But the thing that stood out to me the most with him on film has been, I think he's got far more to his offensive game that, like, I feel like people talk about him sometimes like he's Vando basically. And I think he's much closer to being a Marcus Jake level offensive player than he is Vando. I had, in some regards, I actually think watching some of his drives, I think he's like more coordinated and a better finisher than those guys even. So yes, like the shot selection can be a bit of an issue. Sometimes the turnovers, passing reads could be a bit of an issue, but he is a guy who can pump, take a sidestep 3, make it. He's a guy who can attack closeouts. I see some DJJ in his game where we saw DJJ thrive next to Luka, but the cutting both along the baseline and from the slot, he can also, solid offensive rebounder for a wing, has great length. You could put him 1 through 3 on the primary guys. Like, I think he checks a lot of boxes. And from watching like, it's one thing having Trey Murphy and Jeremiah Fears and Jordan Poole be your offensive initiators and creators. It's another thing to play off of Luka Doncic, LeBron James, and Austin Reeves. I think the shot quality that Herb Jones would get would be the best of his career by far. And I do think that Herb has the all defense potential defensively. And even his extension, I don't think is a bad contract. So like, he's locked up for multiple years. I think he'd be a nice long-term piece. So yes, I think to me, he fits perfectly next to Luka and Austin, but also if Austin doesn't have a good postseason, if the Lakers deem Austin and Luka don't fit, I still think Herb fits next to Luka without Austin. So like, to me, he's still my number 1 trade target. And again, I think if anything, some of his like struggles this season or down numbers would lower his price and make this more attainable, because I do think Herb from a couple of years ago, I think is a guy that you could potentially talk about as being worth like a couple firsts. This similar to like how people talk about Tamani Kamara as being worth a couple firsts. I think he's not at that level right now, but I do see it there, and he's also still in his mid-20s. Like, I think that's a diamond in the rough, just sort of there, and some team is going to acquire him, and I think he's going to be stellar for them. Tommy Gold says, I'd rather get Bey for cheap. My only issue with Bey is I just don't think he's like, if the Lakers acquired Bey, I would still argue for starting Smart. I don't think he's on the Smart Vando level defensively. I don't even think he's on the Laravia level defensively. Maybe he's like probably he's more athletic than a Laravia, so he could probably handle speed and quickness better. But he's kind of in that same mold. To me, he's almost in the same mold of Laravia, Rui, Luka, LeBron. He's sort of a power forward defensively, like I guess like a 3.5. I think he could probably guard threes better than those guys in general, but I do want someone that could guard the backcourt, and that's where Bey, I think, comes up a little short. I want ideally someone who could guard 1 through 3, and I think there's some of the guys that have been mentioned are only forwards, and then some of the guys like a Quentin Grimes, for example, I don't think he can guard up as well. So he's primarily just the backcourt guy, which has value, especially for what the Lakers need. But I would like some more versatility there. But it also depends on what the cost is. Francis Laker, thank you for the super chat. Is it possible to get Miles Turner for the 50th time? It is possible, especially if the Bucks end up going in that direction of trading Giannis or at least selling off pieces. What I will note, so he's making $25.3 million. He's got 3 more years left, 26.6, 27.9, 29. I don't love it. I don't love it. And, I like Miles Turner. I've been an advocate for Miles Turner to be a Laker for years, right? And to your point, like the 50th time he's been traded to the Lakers, but I don't really love that contract. And I think he's regressed defensively and he's never been a good rebounder. So I think you need a certain 4 next to him. I think you need someone with a little bit more brawn, a little bit more physicality, a little bit more rebounding. So sure, can LeBron provide that this year? Yeah, but I think you need like an Aaron Gordon type next to him, and the Lakers don't have that type. That's not Rui. So I just like, especially if the Lakers do keep Rui and they're like, oh, well, we have Miles Turner, so we could play Rui because we have a good defensive center. I mean, if Rui and Miles Turner are your 4 or 5, you're just going to get killed on the defensive glass. Like, I don't really know how else to frame that. So I mean, you could get him potentially for Gabe and Maxey and Dalton, and you're not really giving up much. I don't think I'd want to give up a first, and I don't love the contract length, to be honest, especially with how I think he's aged. All right, I'm going to wrap here, though. Appreciate you guys. I will be back on Friday after the Wizards game. And of course, if any news happens, I will be traveling tomorrow, leave in the morning to New York, get in around 4 p.m. Pacific time. So probably wouldn't be able to go live until realistically, I would say like 6:30. But if something happens tomorrow, I will go live as quickly as I can. If not, I will be back on Friday with Lakers Collective, and then later in the day with Lakers Wizards. But shout out to the chat. Shout out to the late night gang. Appreciate you all. I do keep traveling and nearly jinxing something into happening. So we are getting closer. We are almost a week away from the trade deadline, but appreciate you guys. For those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. For those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. Again, I'll be back potentially tomorrow if something crazy happens, but most likely on Friday. Appreciate y'all, and talk to you guys soon.